Welcome everyone to today's webinar from the Everyone Graduates Center at Johns Hopkins and the National Partnership for Student Success Support Hub, focused on a recently released report from the Everyone Graduates Center titled Increasing School Capacity to Meet Students' Needs, Findings from the 2022-23 National Partnership for Student Success Principals Survey. I'm really excited to be here with you all today. Dr. Bob Balfans from the Everyone Graduates Center will be taking folks through the recently released report today, and then we will be joined by colleagues at the U.S. Department of Education and AmeriCorps to share a bit about what these two agencies are doing to support schools, nonprofits, and others to bring more people into high-impact student support roles through their work with the National Partnership for Student Success. So with that, I'll turn it, and we are also joined by Heather Schwartz from the RAND Corporation, who will be sharing a bit about the RAND Corporation survey instrument that was so important to this work. With that, Bob, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks, Kate. Good afternoon, everybody. The National Partnership for Student Success is a public-private partnership between the U.S. Department of Education, AmeriCorps, and the Everyone Graduates Center at the School of Education, Johns Hopkins, plus over 140 nonprofit champions and a growing number of institutions of higher education and a growing number of state coalitions. And we're collectively working together to increase schools' capacity to meet students' needs coming out of the pandemic. And we know those needs were really heightened, both academically and in well-being. And we also know that there's some good solutions to help students to meet the challenges they're facing. But almost all of them require people power to deliver them. And that's because they're relationship driven, and also it lets them be customized. But if we have much higher student need and we need people powered supports to help address those needs, it means we need more people in schools providing those supports. And that's really what the National Partnership for Student Success has been working, how to get more adults providing high quality, high intensity tutoring, mentoring, success coaching, post-secondary advising, and wraparound supports in schools with quality at the capacity needed. And so one of the things we really want to understand is to what extent are schools being able to increase their capacity to meet student needs by increasing the number of adults in them providing evidence-based student supports? And that's a pretty straightforward question, but in trying to answer it, if we go to the next slide, we found that it defied a simple, quick answer. There isn't really an existing national data source that collects timely information on the number of adults that are working as tutors or mentors, let alone success coaching, which is a combination of sort of tutoring and mentoring and post-secondary advising and wraparound supports. You know, we found some partial data sources, but they are from different time periods and often quite lagged. Or we found, sources that said, here is the number of adults working in school support roles, but not information on what type of role. So then we were fortunate enough to come upon an answer. We go to the next slide. Which was we were able to add 20 questions to the RAND American School Leader Panel Survey in April and May of this past school year. And this is designed to be a nationally representative survey. And if we go to the next slide, I just want to bring Heather Schwartz on for just 1 minute from RAND, because this is a really powerful and important resource to the field. And if you're not aware of these surveys, you should be, and because it's one of the few ways we have to actually get answers to questions like we had of are schools increasing their capacity to provide evidence-based supports.
Thanks, Bob. What a nice endorsement. Running a survey for the National Partnership for Student Success is exactly the kind of work that we want to do with these panels, and we run over a dozen surveys per school year. We have 3 different sets of panels. So you see on the left, a teacher panel that's composed of more than 25,000 teachers, a school principal panel that we call the school leader panel, more than 8,000 principals, and then a school district panel. Importantly, we've sampled the teachers, the principals, and the district leaders from a complete set of rosters so that we can have a nationally representative estimates at the end of the day when we finish surveying teachers, principals, or district leaders. Final thing I'll say is that we post de-identified data for anyone to use and download for free. It's at that website that you see at the bottom of the slide, and we also post all of our reports for free download. Thanks, Bob. Back to you.
Thanks, Heather. So we added 20 questions, the old 20 questions game. If you ask 20 questions, you can get an answer to something, right? To this survey. And what it does include is it's basically a survey of principals. So principals are talking about what's true for their school, both during the school day and in any extended learning time they may have at the school, is what the principals could report on. And we asked them questions about high intensity tutoring, mentoring, college and career advising, and wraparound supports. And a little bit about success coaching, but that's where we needed 25 questions to get full details on that. So that's the one we left for the next time. But what's not included is when students are getting additional student supports in tutoring and mentoring and so forth during the summer, or in out-of-school settings that are not, or community-based, that are not directly in the school building as a part of extended day, or if they're getting it from sort of, near peer supports, by, sort of peer supports. Those are not included in our estimates of how schools are increasing their capacity. As Heather said, one really power of the RAND survey is it is designed to be nationally representative. In this case, it was of about 81,000 of the 100,000 public schools there are in the US. What was not included was principals from non-regular schools, sort of alternative schools and vocational schools, and also from what are called non-states, like Puerto Rico. Important to know, the principals are largely answering this based on recall. They're doing a survey, right? They're not pausing to search their records. And they're answering this as part of a larger battery of questions they're answering. We did provide pop-up definitions of what we meant by high intensity tutoring and success coaching. So we were hoping that they would answer based on the definition we were giving them and not just their interpretation of what that might mean. Okay. Next slide. Let's get to the key findings. So to me, one of the most, I think, hopeful findings was that literally tens of thousands of schools last school year were significantly increased their capacity to provide high intensity tutoring, mentoring, college career advising, or wraparound supports by either adding staff or partnering with student support providers, community-based organizations, things like that. And when you think about it, this last year was really the first full, in a way, school year back from the pandemic. And there's a lot going on and a lot of schools are after doing, and that large numbers of them were able to find the capacity to increase adults to provide these important student supports shows that, in fact, significant numbers of schools were increasing their capacity to provide these evidence-based supports. So we're able to estimate from the survey that about 15,000 schools increased their number of high-intensity tutors, about 10,000 schools added mentors, about a similar number added wraparound support coordinators, and about 3,000 or so added additional college and career advisors, which is largely a high school thing, so you would expect a little smaller number there. Next slide. When we ask ourselves, what does this translate into adults? And again, another thing I found very informative from the results is that, in the end, it was about a third of schools we're going to see that increase the number of adults in one of these areas. But in general, when they did increase their number of adults, they increased them by substantial numbers. It wasn't just adding one or two, right? It was much more likely adding 6, 7, or 8. So when we put those two facts together, a third of the schools increasing and doing this by 6 or 7 or 8 adults, we see that overall, there was 187,000 adults we can estimate, additional adults providing these supports in schools in 2022, 23. And one thing that's also encouraging about that is that one of the impetuses for the National Partnership for Student Success was when President Biden called in the State of the Union for there to be 250,000 adults to come forward to provide tutoring and mentoring supports. That this shows in really the first year of answering that call, a substantial number of adults came forward to meet that call in a way. And on the side, you can see what this translated to the actual numbers of additional adults in those areas. All right. And as we said, another thing that makes logical sense in a way is that most schools increased their numbers in one of the areas. They picked, the area that they thought was most needed for their students, we're assuming, or was where they thought they had the local partner that could give them additional capacity, or the area where they, just that was the place this year they could focus on. And it does make sense that schools would be challenged with everything is all going on to like have a large number of additional mentors and tutors and advisors all in the same year. All right, next slide. Another thing we were able to ask is just what percent of schools were offering these supports, right? Just not did you increase the adults, but in from what you were doing before plus the increase you had this year, if you had them, what percent of schools are providing these evidence-based student supports? And we found that most schools are providing at least one. 87% of principals were doing at least one of these, said they were doing them. And also, I think encouragingly, about 75%, 3 out of 4, said they either had mentors, tutors, or success coaches, which are sort of the more high-intensity student supports, right? That are sort of an ongoing support over time, where strong relationships can be formed with students, and it's sort of a sustained support effort. Individually, we saw that 53% of schools reported increasing the number of high-intensity tutors. That's really, we define that as, the thing of like, multiple sessions a week, small groups, aligned with the school curriculum. What we know to be about effective tutoring practices are sort of captured in that high-intensity tutor definition. About half schools, not quite, also increased the number of mentors and wraparound supports. Most high schools were offering, college and career advising. And interestingly enough, we were surprised by the high number of success coaches we got, because that was the one we thought people might not fully understand what this is, this idea of combining sort of academic and social emotional well-being supports in a more high intensity version of being in the school and being with students on sometimes a daily basis or often multiple times a week. But 28% of schools said they offered something like that, and 41% of high schools. Next slide. We also found that again, encouragingly, that the schools that, where the student needs are likely the greatest were offering supports at higher levels. So 62% of schools where half or more of the students were eligible for free and reduced price lunch said we are giving high intensity tutoring, compared to 45% of the schools where less than 50% of students were getting free and reduced price lunch. As I said, I find these results generally encouraging, given it was really the first year schools could dig into this, and a large number were able to dig in and increase their capacity in significant ways. And when we look across all schools, significant and often majorities are providing these key evidence-based student supports. But there's still a lot of work to be done, right? You can also see that we're far from where we could say, yes, we think we're meeting the sort of the capacity of our student needs. A quarter of schools were saying we don't have any tutors, mentors, or success coaches. And that includes, this was interesting to me, 1 in 3 middle schools, which was the highest, saying we don't have tutors or mentors or success coaches. And when you think about it, that's almost the age when you think this could be of very high importance, right? When it's important for kids to feel, connected and supported and welcome, and if they belong in school, that we're helping them close any academic gaps they might have so they can be ready for success in high school, that we're starting to connect them to their future. And so that's an area where, I think we have to understand a little bit more why they might be on the lower end providing this, and what we can do about to address that. Okay. Next slide. I think we, all right, now we get to turn it over to our friends to tell us what's being done to further increase schools' capacity to provide these high impact student supports.
Thank you, Bob. And first, I'm going to turn it over to Maureen Tracy Mooney from the U.S. Department of Education, who will share a bit about what the department is doing around this effort as part of their work for MPSS. Over to you, Mo.
Thanks so much, Kate, and thank you, Bob. We're so excited by the results and the report and for your work and leadership at the NPSS and at Everyone Graduate Center. Just really excited about the progress of an additional 187,000 additional adults in roles as tutors and mentors and our other NPSS support roles in last school year alone. Such significant progress towards the president's goal. Before sort of diving into some of these more technical resources, I'll highlight that when we think about what the Department of Education is doing to support these efforts, first and foremost, of course, is really pushing for the use of the $122 billion in American Rescue Plan elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds for the purpose of supporting our students in these ways. And we are seeing districts and states across the country really embrace, as we've seen in the data, using those COVID relief funds for high intensity tutoring, for mentoring supports, for investing in the mental health needs of our students. And we'll continue to press till the last day those funds are eligible for use, for funds to be used in these really evidence-based high impact ways. Since working with NPSS since working with our partners there at AmeriCorps to launch the NPSS at the White House last year, we've been deeply engaged with the NPSS, making sure that ed partners and stakeholders at all levels understand and are aware of the great technical assistance and other resources that NPSS can provide, and encouraging them to use their education funds for this purpose. We're also really excited about the Secretary's call to action, the moment we've all been waiting for, our emergency alarms. One moment. We thought it was going to be during you, Bob, and we were wrong. Very excited that this summer, Secretary of Education issued a Dear Colleague letter to our leaders of institutions of higher education and our school districts, calling on them to work together to provide more tutoring mentors, wraparound supports coordinators, student success coaches, post-secondary transition coaches to support our K-12 students. And by the response of the higher education field to that ask, specifically the request that they use more of their federal work study funds to support college students in these community service roles, using those federal work study funds, and to devote specifically 15% of their funds for community service and dedicating whatever increase. So if they're at 8% now and are moving up to 15%, use that additional 7% of funds for community service to invest in our NPSS roles. So college students are serving as tutors, for example, in the local school. We're excited about how the higher education community has responded to that call to action. And if you haven't seen it yet, definitely encourage you to take a look at that Dear Colleague letter. It really breaks down the financial interest that institutions of higher education have in using federal work study funds for this purpose, eligible to use up to 100% of federal work study, cover 100% of those wages in these types of roles. So that's really exciting, as well as, of course, the inherent interest our colleges and universities have in making sure that their K-12 students that are coming into their colleges are prepared. And that's, of course, what these NPSS roles are all about. And second, the Dear Colleague letter really outlines the wealth of federal department resources in addition to the American Rescue Plan funds that can be used by our LEAs and our SEAs to support tutors, mentors, our student success coaches, the additional roles. And that's really important because we know that everyone, and rightly so, is thinking about the upcoming expiration of the next year of those American Rescue Plan funds and ensuring that we have a plan to sustain them. So the letter really outlines the ongoing funds that can be used for this purpose. I think we're really excited about the opportunity schools have to use this not only for recovery, but to sustain high impact supports and gain even more practice and expertise in implementing these high quality programs. With that, I'll turn it over back to Kate.
Thanks so much, Mo, and thank you for your continued partnership in this work. With that, I'm pleased to turn it over to Tara Wallen from AmeriCorps.
Thanks, Kate. I think one of the things you heard from Bob as we were talking about, the president's call to have 250,000 additional people serving in student support roles is that we really need to think about where are those large groups of people that could be serving and supporting students. And so I think You just heard Mo highlight many things that many groups of people that can be supported with ARP funds, and particularly college students. Another really significant population of people that we think about at AmeriCorps is volunteers in high impact roles. So there are more than 50,000 AmeriCorps members and volunteers that are supporting P12 student success in schools and in out of school time programs. But on top of that, through a grant program we call the Volunteer Generation Fund, or the VGF, we also support a number of organizations that bring in volunteers in high impact evidence-based roles. And so during the 22-23 school year, we were able to run 2 competitions to award volunteer generation funds. The first was utilizing funding from the American Rescue Plan. The second was using our annual appropriation. So this is something we hope to continue into the future, though we don't have a current notice out right now. We would, should we have appropriations from Congress, we would expect that to go out later this year and early next year. But through those 2 competitions, we included a priority around organizations that were looking to recruit, retain, support volunteers in NPSS aligned roles. And through that, in each competition, around 75% of the grants went to organizations that were aligned to that NPSS priority. So across the 2, we provided grants to 21 organizations that were a mix of youth serving organizations, state service commissions, even a state Department of Education. And those 21 grants totaled a little over $20 million, with the potential for some to get additional funding in future years. But based on their initial estimates, they're looking collectively aiming to put more than 40,000 additional adults into NPSS aligned roles over the next 3 years. So a number of those folks are not going to be counted in the data that Bob was walking us through based on when the grant's awarded and people, will start having people in those roles. But we really hope to see in future years data reflect that volunteers in high impact roles will make a big difference in making sure students have support they need, particularly as things like the American Rescue Plan start to wind down, and states and schools and districts are looking for ways to sustain this work moving forward. So we're excited to keep finding ways to have more people in these roles, and to continue to partner with the Department of Ed and Johns Hopkins through the NPSS. So I will turn it back over to Kate.
Thank you, Tara, and thank you for your partnership in this work. We're very fortunate to have 2 great agency partners in this work of the MPSS. So I want to speak a little bit next about what we're doing at the National Partnership for Student Success Support Hub, which is based at the Everyone Graduate Center at Johns Hopkins, to also support the field in bringing more people into high impact student support roles around the country. As I'm speaking, I also encourage you to use the Q&A feature, whether it's about something I'm saying, something Bob shared, Tara, Mo, Heather. Please do enter questions into the Q&A, and we'll have a little bit of time for that at the end. So we at the MPSS Support Hub really serve as a nonprofit partner within the NPSS that works to support the field to bring more people into high impact student support roles as tutors, mentors, student success coaches, post-secondary transition coaches, and people who are coordinating wraparound or integrated student supports. We do this by first providing technical assistance to state and local efforts to expand programs focused on these roles or that include these roles, or to improve the quality of these programs. We also do quite a bit of work to develop resources, including a set of voluntary quality standards, which I'll share in the chat shortly, to support implementation at the state and local level. In just a minute, I'll talk through some specific resources that might be useful to this audience. Next, we do a lot of work to connect and convene school districts, nonprofits, mostly youth-serving organizations, intermediaries, associations, AmeriCorps programs, as well as state and local government entities to break down silos between the work that we know many different stakeholders in communities around the country are working on, and also create opportunities for peer-to-peer sharing between organizations and schools engaging in similar work across different communities, as well as within the same community. And finally, as we've been discussing, we do a lot of work to identify and connect large groups of people beyond one-to-one recruitment of a tutor here, a mentor there, but thinking about large groups of people who could be both motivated and well-suited to serve in these high-impact student support roles if provided the right opportunities, the right training, and the right ongoing support. And to give you an idea of what types of populations we're thinking about here, college students are a great example. As Mo mentioned before, a lot of the work that we've been focused on with the Department of Education in recent months has been encouraging colleges and universities to bring more college students into these roles in partnership with local districts and youth-serving nonprofit organizations. Retirees and older adults are also a crucial group of people to serve in these roles, whether it's through AmeriCorps Seniors volunteer programs or other programs that engage older adults or retirees in service of schools and of communities. People who are working for large youth-serving organizations are another great example here. People in youth worker roles often already have a great foundation and training in youth development and already have great connections with local students, community. So this is also a great place. And the final one that we're really thinking a lot about this year is how to engage more high school students in near peer roles with the right support structures to support younger students. So more specifically related to our technical assistance, this is available at no cost to any nonprofit organization, state or local government entity, school district, or intermediary or coalition that's serving those types of stakeholders. And technical assistance is provided by experts from Accelerate, the National Student Support Accelerator, City Year, Communities in Schools, Mentor, and the National College Attainment Network, each of whom are really experts in their particular focus area, whether it's tutoring or post-secondary transition coaching. And to give you some examples of the types of support that they provide to nonprofits, to schools, to communities, one option is really focused consultation. So for example, we've had nonprofits reach out to us for support in improving the training offerings for their volunteer mentors, for example. They can get technical assistance, consultation from Mentor at no cost over the course of a 1 to 2 month period, and determine in partnership with Mentor what new structures or new systems or new content they want to put in place at their organization to improve volunteer training for mentors. Similarly, there are many examples of either colleges or universities or school districts or local nonprofit organizations reaching out to the NPSS for support in developing connections with others in their community who are doing similar work or could may be able to offer sources of people power, so to speak. So for example, connecting a local United Way chapter with a university or a system of universities that's in their community or region to encourage more college students to serve in tutoring roles facilitated by that United Way. Just to give you a couple examples, though it's not limited to just those. I'm putting the link in the chat for how to request technical assistance if this is something that is useful to you as a practitioner, as a leader. I also really encourage you, if you are engaged in this work, whether you're providing direct services, whether you're with an association that represents key stakeholders to this effort, teachers, principals, superintendents, youth workers, etc., I would encourage you to join our coalition for opportunities to not only hear updates from the National Partnership for Student Success and have the stories of your community and your organization lifted up, but also for opportunities for collaboration with people who may be grappling with similar challenges to what you face in your role. We know this is hard work, and we believe that by bringing people together to share challenges, successes, lessons learned, pitfalls to avoid, strategies for getting resources to support this work, that it can improve everybody's impact. So I strongly encourage you to reach out to us if you're interested in joining our coalition. None of our work includes fees, so very low barrier to entry. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about some of the specific resources that we at the NPSS Hub currently offer. And there are a number of other resources that are actively being developed by our technical assistance leads, and encourage you to follow us for more information on this in the future. I will put all of this in the chat as well so that you have access to it. One example, a crucial example here is our voluntary quality standards. This is a resource that was developed with input from about 20 different organizations, both our technical assistance leads as well as leading nonprofit, youth-serving nonprofits from around the country, really outlining key elements of quality for any program that's serving young people through tutors, mentors, success coaches, etc. And it outlines those common areas of quality that must be true regardless of the type of support that's being provided, as well as specific elements of quality for tutoring by itself, mentoring by itself, etc. Knowing that, for example, the training needed for a tutor may vary significantly from the training that's needed for a post-secondary transition coach. Though there are some commons across both as it relates to developing positive relationships with youth, etc. Next, we have a couple audience-specific resources that I encourage you to check out if, as they are relevant to you. We have a state partnership resource that outlines key steps to establishing a state-level partnership for student success, which in an ideal world is a collaboration between more than one state agency or state actor to get more people into evidence-based and people-powered student support roles, supporting young people in their state. And this comes in many forms. Next, we have a district partnership toolkit resource, which outlines some key initial steps for districts who are looking to partner with other entities, whether it's local government, youth-serving nonprofits, colleges, or universities in their communities to get more tutors, mentors, post-secondary transition coaches, etc., at their schools. So I encourage you to check that out if you are a school or district leader. And finally, we have a similar toolkit that is targeted toward the college and university audience, with some concrete strategies for how colleges might think about placing and funding more college students to serve in high impact pre-K through 12 student support roles in their communities. So really encourage you to dive into these resources if they're of interest. And finally, as I mentioned before, we are fairly frequently coming out with new briefs, new resources, and I encourage you to subscribe to our newsletter or follow us on social media if more resources like this are of interest to you. And with that, we do have some time for Q&A. I see we have one question here that I can pose to Bob, but encourage participants to add questions to the Q&A function or to the chat, and we will field them as they come in. I'm going to stop sharing for just a second. So Bob, I think, so this first question is around the RAND report, and whether it is this considered perhaps the baseline data? And if you could speak a little bit to the nature of this data, growth versus baseline, that would be helpful.
Yeah. So we were actually trying to get both those points. We are asking them just, to what extent do you provide this support in your school, which in a way you could argue was baseline, because we got like 53% said we're doing high intensity tutoring and various things, but we also were very interested in this additional adults and increased capacity this year. So at least half our questions were about, have you increased the number of adults providing these supports this year? If you have, by about how many additional adults have you increased? Are more of your students getting, tutoring this year than last year? So those were more like the gain questions. So there's an element of both the baseline, but definitely we were able to show that a significant number, about a third of the schools, in significant ways added additional adults to provide more supports last school year. And what I want to say is, again, like I just, you could argue, well, that's, a third, that means others didn't. But again, just have to think how many things schools are trying to do at once, and that just the amount of work it takes to organizationally organize yourself, to maybe partner with somebody or hire new people, create the space and time in your schedule to provide these supports. That's a significant lift, and that a third of the schools are able to do it at substantial numbers shows a significant gain of capacity. Now we have to keep working at it, and as more and more data comes out, I really encourage everyone to join this coalition to get more adults providing high quality supports to our students in and out of school, because that's becoming more and more clear that for many students, the pandemic really was 2+ years of sort of interrupted education in one way or another. And those have many lasting impacts if we don't organize and mobilize ourselves to provide our kids the supports they need to both recover, but then to thrive. And we know we can do, we know that additional supports, high quality with strong relationships, make a big difference. So we just have to keep mobilizing ourselves to get that to all the kids that need it.
Thank you, Bob. And truly encourage people to add more questions if you have them. No question is too small.
And the other thing we are
Yeah,
interested in is we are going to give this survey again next year. And we're going to try to have 25 questions this time instead of 20. So what are some additional things we'd like to know, or people give us suggestions of things that you'd like to know about the growth and provision of mentoring and tutoring and post-secondary advising and wraparound supports in schools?
And feel free to enter this either into the Q&A as remarks or into the chat. And I believe folks also have the ability to raise hand. All right, we have, what's typical turnover of volunteers or mentors annually? I think it's a great question.
It's a great question, yeah.
And the one other piece that I'll share is that we are pretty actively working to also think about how we can collect information, not only about school-based services, whether they're offered by the school itself or a partner nonprofit that works out of the school building, but other out-of-school time supports. All right, we've got, I'd like to see the numbers of out-of-school time supports on campus. So some differentiation between what's happening during the school day versus out-of-school time. That's great. I'd be interested in learning how they are supervised and managed. For example, the volunteer is providing career mental health counseling. Would that be through the school counseling office or another structure?
Yeah, those are great questions. And we know it's happening both ways, that we know some schools are just hiring more staff and other schools are partnering with nonprofit partners that are sort of, in a way, managing some of those things. And for example, we know when we're trying to scale up the number of work study students, we're encouraging the universities to partner with local nonprofits that are already in schools providing these supports, so that the work study students go into an already supported and organized and managed environment. So that is an important question to ask. And the other one also is that we're going to definitely ask is, How many more adults would you need in order to reach all of the kids you think that could benefit from these supports? That will be, I think, very interesting to learn next year.
Agreed. And we have one more on knowing what prevents schools from having more volunteer tutors and mentors.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I'm going to put my email in the chat. If you think of other things, I strongly encourage you to reach out. This is something that we're excited to be developing over the course of the next few months, and really value your input about what's not only helpful to us at the NPSS, but what might be helpful to the field. And you will see my email in the chat now. So with that, I want to just share a reminder that you can read the full report, along with a number of data summary tables that dive deeper beyond what the report talks about, as well as an infographic that really goes over the key findings in an easily digestible format on the NPSS website. This link is in the chat as well. And I really want to thank our partners, Tara and Mo at AmeriCorps and the U.S. Department of Education, and our collaborator, Heather, at the RAND Corporation for their contributions, obviously to this webinar, but to this work more broadly. It truly has been a collaborative effort, and I've been excited to partner with you all on this. Thank you all so much for joining us, and I hope you have an excellent rest of your day.